So I think there should be some type of needs guarantee from the government. But I think how we guarantee those needs is going to depend on what specific type of good the good is. I don't know if you've ever taken like economics class, but there's this like quadrant you can draw of like types of goods.
The food is cheap at the price that we fucking get cancer, and then a bunch of people like housing. You know, we keep housing expensive. Damn it! Because not just for the corporate like landlords, but for the everyday person.
Those two things you listed would be negative externalities under my view.
There's no hole anyways.
And we can tax negative externalities, and that actually makes the market more efficient if we tax negative externalities.
In order to do this, you need a separation of the state and corporations, which is becoming more and more impossible. Do you acknowledge that there is no like no pure economic system? Like
absolutely, yeah.
There is no,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So could you agree that maybe we need socialism in some cases, communism in some cases, and capitalism, or at least core concepts of these ideologies mixed together, and that we shouldn't like, the conversation shouldn't be, should the economy be entirely communist, socialist, blah, blah, blah. Let's get a little economical just real quick. Just I'm curious because I don't run into too many communists anymore. What brought you to communism?
Well, I know capitalism's broken. I actually, to me, this is my take, and you know, I've, like I said, read a lot of books. I like David Graeber a lot. I like his, you know, takes on stuff, and I think that the indigenous society is obviously the
conservatives do hate leftist protests. It's wild.
All of
like with Greg Abbott, it's especially like over like he went from signing laws protecting free speech to criticizing the stuff on college campuses right now. It's wild.
This book, The Dawn of Everything, it was a book that Wahan wrote, where it introduced these concepts to the European society before the Enlightenment, and you know, the idea of women's suffrage, the idea of equality, the idea that, you know, the leader is not even ordained by God. Back then, before then, people just comprehended the king was God. That's just how they saw it. So this idea of egalitarian society, and you know, it all came from this this book.
JDX, I have no clue what that is, and we're not talking about it right now.
Wahan's conversations with I can't remember what they call it. His name was Kandiarak, but they called him something different in the book, and it's a French book. But that basically introduced all these concepts, and it became these concepts. Like it was so popular that it was pirated. It was like the #1 book at the time, and everyone talked about it. And then eventually these concepts, you know, became like the ideas, and then that's where the noble savage came from. Was once they became indoctrinated, people would say, "Oh, well, these came from this." And they were like, "Oh yeah, no, these fucking noble savages taught us these ideas. We always do these." And so it's this whole train of events where it became the Age of Enlightenment, and Marxism basically came from our perceptions of what indigenous society was. And if you look at it, they'd be like to say it was primitive communism. Well, it's just communism without the fucking luxuries. You don't have to have, you know, if it had more luxuries, it was more capitalistic, then it would be communism. Like they just didn't have, they intentionally didn't have money. They wasn't that they were ignorant. And if you listen to these dialogues and stuff of, you know, how they were great philosophers, they were not ignorant of what they were doing. These people had conversations. We based our whole government off the Iroquois Confederacy, and you know, it's not, we call it the Iroquois Confederacy, but it's, you know, whatever they were called themselves, Shoshone, I think, or whatever they were. But yeah, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions about where information came from and where inventions came from, where concepts. It's not Western society is real good at indoctrinating things from other people's cultures and then using it as a weapon. That's what they do. That's what Western society is. So, and like these concepts, it's not necessarily Western society, because a lot of it's pre that, you know, like Greek philosophy and that, you know, was pantheism. Like Plato was a pantheist. Pantheism is an umbrella. It's a way to see the universe, and many things are pantheistic. Buddhism is pantheistic. You know, lots of religions and philosophies are pantheistic in their essence. They just believe the fucking parables. They hear the stories and they believe, oh yeah, this wasn't about the lesson I learned. They believe it was the fucking donkey was talking. Holy shit. You know, it wasn't the lesson the donkey learned. They missed that. They get caught up in the bullshit, not the fucking lesson. So That's my take on where I started, how I ended up here.
Who specifically
Why?
are you claiming intentionally didn't invent money? Because we also have examples of like early societies using like seashells as like mediums of exchange, right?
Yeah. Yes, they were not a homogenous society, and some of them had slaves and some didn't. But overall, they were the people who didn't have money, the ones like the Iroquois. They knew that the other people had money. And that's what I'm saying. They chose not to have that. They knew other people did, but they said we're not going to follow that. If you listen to like I can send you a link. It's it looks funny and shit, but it's basically a marionette of a conversation that Tandy Aronk had with these English people, and it shows, like his logic, where he'd be like, oh, wouldn't you want to come see Paris and all this money? And it's like, oh yeah, no, why would I want to go there and be a fucking slave to money? Like, to spend my whole life, wake up in the morning and
I accidentally canceled the lobby. Oh no.
Did I do something?
No, you didn't do anything. I accidentally canceled the lobby that everybody was in. No, we had people.
Oh no.
Dude, I'm actually fucking pissed. I can't believe I did that. I hope they come back. Well.
So when you say communism, what would that look like today? Like, do you think like the USSR was like a communist society, or do you think it was a socialist society like striving for communism?
Right. It was horizontal structure. People weren't leaders because they were, they had wealth. Wealth was fucking not like if hoarded wealth had no political power. It's just because you had wealth didn't mean you had any say in what the leadership was. In fact, you might have been the fucking biggest asshole. No one listened to you. So that would be communism. Yeah, you can have a hoard shit, but that doesn't give you political power. And then if you look, I guess to me, communism, the best way I can explain it, and you guys may or may not know, I've recently learned a lot more just with like the Zapatista movement, and like where that came from, indigenous views of the world, and
sure. So like
how
we talk about
just all that shit with the Aztecs and Mayans. We look at we know about the Aztecs because they were basically the best capitalists or whatever, at the time. But there were so many cultures around that area that were not the Aztecs, that were more communistic and socialistic, and their leaders were delegates. No one was elected leader. They were just the people who people listened to at the time. If they started saying stupid shit, people quit listening to them.
So that could be one aspect of it, like, and that's probably an aspect that I would agree with. Like, just because you have wealth doesn't necessarily mean that you should have political power. But like, I think another aspect of it usually is some type of state ownership, or by other means collective ownership of either the means of production or factors of production. So can you lay out like what would that look like today?
Well, obviously today it's a much more complex system because we have fucking technologies, and we're dependent on petroleum to even just feed us, so we can have the nitrogen we need to grow the plants we need to feed everyone. It's a much more complex system. And
not obviously, right now, maybe next time. We're like legitimately, you're going to make me look bad. Like, unironically, someone from my community expressing your views would make me look bad. Unironically,
they achieved. But they did it by not having all this fucking wealth and opulence and bullshit that we have to have in order to exist. We don't really have to have, but we think we do. So how would we do that? We have to fucking make a lot of sacrifices and give up shit that we think we need that we really don't need, like yachts and fucking bullshit.
So what are these sacrifices going to include? They're going to include yachts. What else would they include? Would they?
I don't know. Like, do we all have to have everything we have? Yeah, I think you would agree with that, right? We are very opulent.
No,
we don't
but
have all the luxuries we have.
There are a lot of things that seem to increase our quality of life, right? That people like having.
Absolutely. But we've taken that and blown it up to, oh my God, I can't ever have any discomfort. You know what I mean? Like, would you agree? Like, we believe our light's on. You know what I mean? Like, it's great to have light, but we're so fucking lazy that we don't value the fact that we have this light. Like, they say in America, so many people are fucking dehydrated just because now water is no longer scarce.
I'm sorry.
So you don't fucking think about it. You know what I mean? You just, water's there, and because it's always there.
And I have ADHD, and I just literally.
And it's getting better. People are aware of that, but for a long time, people had to really fucking go find water. It was scarce.
Okay,
So it was
so
something you thought about constantly. So
you
that's
think
the
we
type of stuff
should?
I'm saying. Like, it's not necessarily we have to give it up. I think we just have to appreciate it and then stop being lazy and figure out how to like for example,
It's a
I think you
radar
would agree.
dish.
Hemp would be a much better alternative for a lot of the products we use to package things, right? Biodegradable plastic instead of
I
being
mean,
lazy and
maybe,
using
but like
petroleum and
it's so
letting.
like we could imagine examples though, where like we don't have to give up like the substantial quality of life improvements that we've seen to do that, right? Like the government could right now subsidize hemp packaging, and we wouldn't have to give up the quality of life features that you're
And why do we
proposing we
not
give
do
up.
that? Why do we
I
not do
mean,
that? Because
political
people who have
reasons.
capital are, yeah, exactly, because we've allowed their wealth to influence our decisions and we've tied capital to political power. There's no
I mean,
reason that capital or wealth or hordes or whatever you want to call it is actually tied to political power. That's a false attachment.
I mean, that could be part of the reason, but it seems like there are societies even today that are capitalist societies that don't necessarily have these same type of problems. We can talk about like the social democracies in like European states that it doesn't seem like wealth influences politics as much over there as it does over here. So couldn't we make those types of changes here and not have to? So why are you proposing then that we like accept these substantial decreases in quality of life just to allow hemp packaging or whatever?
Is it a decrease in the quality of life to have better packages and turn your fucking lights off and to, you know what I mean?
To turn
not necessarily have to have
lights
strawberry all the time.
I mean,
that's not a decrease.
You're talking about decreases in quality of life. I mean, the hemp packaging might not necessarily be decreasing quality of life because of the negative externalities.
How is it a decrease in the quality of life to have a light on in a room that you're not in? How is that actually making your life
people
better?
prefer to have their lights on, right?
Okay.
Their life is better if their lights on. That's why they keep the lights on.
It's a false perception. It's not actually making your life better to have a light on in a room that you're not in.
Don't you think there's a revealed preference there? That the fact that people do leave their lights on, don't you think that kind of reveals that they prefer to leave their lights on?
Yeah, that's great. I prefer to have enough power for everyone and then not have people starve because they want to have their lights on.
You're talking about negative externalities again.
At a certain point, their decision to leave their lights on is like we would talk about. You can swing your arms around, but eventually, when your arm hits my face, that's when your right to stop happens. So yes, if you leaving your light on is what is the reason why we don't have the resources we need, because your preference is to swing your arms around wildly, then at some point we have to say stop swinging your arms around wildly.
I mean, I would agree with that, which is why I'm in favor of certain
swinging your arms around wildly.
Yeah. Wait, guys.
I would agree with that, which is why I'm in favor of externality taxes. Yeah, sure. Go.
All right. Why are you guys talking about just like straight up the lights, though? I think wouldn't the better thing be that it doesn't make sense for us to it's nice that we can have yachts and boats and extra like vacation homes and stuff, but wouldn't it be like better because like energy is close to possibly to be unlimited, right? With nuclear energy, I think it's a bad example.
Awesome.
Sure.
I think we should talk about things that like are really needed. Like it doesn't make sense.
Why do we choose not to distribute the food to the people that need? We create enough food on this planet. We throw so much away. Why do we choose not to get that food to the people that need it? That's a choice.
Well, I don't even think the food is the best one either. I think we're actually close to ending, world hunger. I mean, we could do it right now without capitalism. Yeah, we could
do it right now, but we choose to use our resources to do other things because the capitalists would rather have what they want. You know what I mean? I'm not saying there's a certain point where you should be able to do things, but at a certain point when your decisions are causing millions of people to go hungry. I agree with, I don't know everyone's name, and I don't, I apologize again, but I agree with whoever I was talking to there. That, I think we should do things to limit that, and that's because we should use delegate power, not elected power. People should be going to discuss what our problem, how to fix our problems, and they shouldn't necessarily be deciding at that discussion any solutions that weren't already approved on by the people at the local level.
My God.
These ones are always hard.
I got a hole in one.
Yes.
What? You got a hole in one on that one?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
but I think the number one example of wealth inequality and how we're absolutely fucking people Or actually, there's 3 examples I would point to that I think are like really good to like get across the non-fawn. Would be with food, when it comes to profit, like they fucking shove junk like artificial preservatives and all this shit down canned food down our throat because it's cheaper. But guess what? Long term, it's not cheaper because we get fucking cancer, we get like stomach ulcers, we have health issues.
We've also externalized.
We only get cancer in California.
I actually think California is I used to make fun of California for like putting all the cancer labels on, but the thing is, like, the more I look into it, the more they're actually right. Like, so
I just think it's funny. The label's funny that known to the state of California, like,
yeah,
like it's
yeah. But that's the point, is that our food is fucking cheap.
You're right there.
The food is cheap at the price that we fucking get cancer, and then a bunch of people like housing. You know, we keep housing expensive.
Damn it!
Because not just for the corporate like landlords, but for the everyday person that they want to keep their fucking equity in a house, and they want to be able to get like, you know, their house to like go up and build equity and stuff. But you know, that's fucking greed, because honestly, we should just be building house and not using it as an investment vehicle. Yeah. Your needs should be met before you fucking start talking about building equity and start building shit. We have so many homeless people, and it's not even better to like have this capitalist system. You can make like the argument of like, oh well, eventually it'll get there and stuff, but it literally isn't better, because we're not getting there. It's actually getting worse, and it leads to more problems, because the more homeless people we have, the more money we have to spend to take care of the homeless people, and then the more like people that are in poverty and not doing well, the more money we have to spend to get them up to par or to deal with them. So now we spend more on police, more on jails, more on response, more on like graffiti, treatment. Like, so it just fucking builds up, and it becomes like this. What do you call it? The fucking snake that eats its tail. Yeah, that's what capitalism ends up when you like start talking about necessity and capitalizing necessity.
Communism is efficiency. That's what that is.
I don't 100% disagree with those, but those those 2 things you listed would be negative externalities under my view.
Here's the whole anyways.
And we can tax negative externalities, and that actually makes the market more efficient if we tax negative externalities. Like, I would agree that like if we have like, you know, evidence that like I think we should tax sugar. I think sugar is a negative externality. I think it's leading people to get obese. Therefore, we should tax sugar, and that makes the market more efficient. But I like that's the way
Nope. Damn it.
The best way I view dealing with these problems.
Taxing it because we have to have money. Do we really have to have money? Can't we just have healthcare that, you know, takes care of people and help prevent that? You know what I mean? Like, it's all like we intentionally make it this way. We really do, because certain people, it makes them be able to have more. I mean, they manipulate the markets on purpose to make this happen.
I don't know if I buy that conspiracy of people are manipulating the market so people eat more sugar, so people can.
But by their choices.
Okay, well,
I think the problem
Kraft isn't saying I want people to get cancer, but by his decisions of saying it's cheaper for me to fucking put sawdust in my product than it is for me to, you know.
Hey, don't attack Taco Bell.
Oh, I love Taco Bell.
That's just one example. It is inherent in everything. It is
it's a mixture of profit incentive.
The choices we make.
But like, I would say, like, don't you think it's good that we incentivize food to be cheap?
Petroleum overhead. Petroleum is just ancient plants. It's ancient sunlight and ancient plants. We can get the same fucking resources.
I mean, I'm going through a difficult time.
But that would allow that, you know, like Ralph Nader said, they could put a meter on the sun. We'd all be using solar power.
True. I think so. Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to talk about taxing, right? You're saying that we need to
Yeah.
tax, things that are negative, we tax. Things that are positive, we give incentives. This is how capitalism could, self-correct, right? But in order to do this, you need a separation of the state and corporations, which is becoming more and more impossible in the United States. So I think at first, okay, I agree that might work. I don't know if that's a Band-Aid or if that's a poor, fix, right?
We have
I
to
think
end generational wealth.
but like corporations and government are in bed. That's the main problem, is that you have super PACs that pretty much fucking legalize bribery. And the person that has the most amount of money thrown into their campaign is typically almost always the person that ends up winning. You have rare cases like AOC, right? Where that isn't what happens, but that is an exception to the rule, right? So the first thing you would have to do
were
is
opposed to her. They love her now, but they didn't want her. You know what I mean? Like if you
because Democrats are
the Democrats hated her, and then she won, and now they love her.
Yeah, so you would have to decouple government and economics, and corporations, which becomes almost impossible when you allow the mass amount of wealth in the hands of a few individuals.
Yes.
I mean,
That's
it's for that reason. I think
the good old days. I'm a conservative. Sorry.
I think wealth tax, or I think
Go ahead.
like large amounts of income inequality is a negative externality in that sense, because it has negative effects on our political system. But like, I don't know exactly what type of systems you guys are proposing, but I would say like the good thing about our system right now is that like we can change, like we can vote in AOC, we can vote in Bernie Sanders, like these people can run, they have the freedom to run.
Put a 90% tax bracket at the highest level, like the good old days.
I mean, we could do that, yeah.
Tax bracket at the highest level.
What was that? What?
Whereas like in the socialist systems, historically, we haven't seen that same type of like capacity for change. Yeah.
To be fair, the systems that you would probably call socialist and communist aren't actually ones that live up to the socialist and communist ideals. Let's be honest.
I mean,
when people are talking about like the USSR and Cuba, what you are talking about is a centralized centralized power and authoritarianism coupled with a pre-planned market. But never have we seen in
What we're talking about is a bunch of man-made concepts that we can redefine a million times, but the ideas are the same. Not fucking hoarding shit, sharing, equality. You know what I mean? Making sure people are provided for instead of, do you want to live in a society where some people can have all they want, or where some people, where everyone,
or we're getting 666 levels now.
Yeah.
The devil is with us, the boys.
But that's the choices. Like that's.
So I will say, like, I'm much more like sympathetic to a view of like, let's say like what I call like co-op socialism, where like we still have like a relatively market economy, but we just mandate that companies be a worker co-op. I'm definitely more sympathetic to that type of view. I think there are problems with that view.
We can call it whatever we want, but we know what we're looking for. It's the goals are there, and we can rename it a million times. Call it it wasn't communism before it was done, but now it's called communism. It's been done. Like I said, it's Native Americans didn't call themselves communists; they just called themselves the people, like everyone else does.
I mean, sure. Again, I don't like these word games either. Okay, people call me socialist just because I'm relatively left leaning, right?
Yeah, socialist.
I'm not trying to.
I would never say
discount anything anyone's saying. I'm putting this out there to the discussion in general. I'm not saying anyone's doing this or whatever. I'm just saying in reality, communism is a word we made. So like, does it exist in nature? Does communism actually exist? No, we say it does. So there are certain things that do exist. Like I would say goodness exists. The facts of Platonic forms. So being good, and the opposite of good to me is greed. Good is sharing and greed is hoarding. That's bad.
I mean, so yeah, this kind of goes back to our earlier point, but I guess like I think one thing the market does relatively well is, for the most part, not talking about negative externalities here for a second, but it sets up good incentives for people. Like it is good that companies are incentivized to make food cheap. We can talk about negative externalities that result from that, because it's the incentives there to use things like sugar, which end up making people obese. But I think if we tax sugar, we can effectively control those incentives, right? But I think on the whole, it's a good thing that companies are incentivized to make food cheap. Because, I mean, that's good for poor people.
The problem is we've allowed individuals to corrupt that goodness for their own profit, right? Like trying to do good. Fascists will always try to corrupt anything that's successful. That's what they do. It's in their fucking nature. That's what fascists do.
I mean, that's why I would advocate for something like, democracy. I think democracy is like an effective sort of control on the market system where we can say, hey, these people have too much wealth, right? we can tax their wealth. There's some distorting incentives.
But what is democracy? What is democracy?
I mean, you're going to say it's a corporatocracy, but
no, I just no. I mean, it's like true democracy would be every single person has a vote on every single decision we make. We're not going to do that, right? So then we have to limit democracy. So how do we limit that? And the most important thing is there's a million ways to do it. Right now, we have a hierarchy of control where people on the top, a few people on the top, have all the power, as opposed to a system which does exist and it has existed in the past. We just pretend it doesn't because, like, again, how does America treat communists? We say it's fucking evil and all those concepts. That's what we do. Capitalism is the only thing that can exist and it's the only thing that can save us. Everything else is bad, right? But these things have existed where people actually have control from the bottom. And the people on top, anyone who tries to fucking assert power and act like they're in charge, everyone would just laugh at them and say, you're a fucking fool. You're crazy. How can one person be in charge of all of us?
I mean,
okay, let me throw out a big...
Okay, sure, go.
Oh, sorry. No. You go, and then I'll go right after you.
Okay. I mean, I think a lot of that's true during the Red Scare, but I think like today we're seeing like more and more socialists, especially young people, start like openly embracing socialism. And like the reality is, like, I mean, we do have the capacity for change, which I like.
You guys are awesome.
True.
I'm 48. I didn't learn this shit until I became 30, and what I tried, but I mean, it's available, and you guys are sucking it up, and it's awesome. You understand that was all bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like
they're panicking. That's why Trump exists, because they're fucking panicking because they're losing control. That's why Biden's doing everything he can to act like he's helping, but still keeping the power. But he's still, obviously a better decision. I'd rather have the good cop than the bad cop, right? No one wants the cop that's beating them. They want the cop that's bringing them coffee. Even though they're both on the same side, I'd rather have the coffee than the fucking beating.
That's bullshit.
Okay, so Nonfon, do you acknowledge that there is no pure economic system? Like,
absolutely, yeah.
There is no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So could you agree that maybe we need socialism in some cases, communism in some cases, and capitalism, or at least core concepts of these ideologies mixed together, and that we shouldn't the conversation shouldn't be, should the economy be entirely communist, socialist, blah, blah, blah. It's what aspects need to change and be what. Right?
Absolutely,
and what policies ways. Okay.
No, so I've had these conversations before. I think we should only be focusing on what parts of the economy need to be more socialist and what parts of the economy need to be more capitalist. Yeah.
So let me throw out a few examples here. All right. So let me throw together a mixed market economy here. So let's start with the capitalist aspect. So everything that is non-important to life, up to capitalism, free market, right? Fidget spinners, video game consoles, TVs, right? All cars, scooters, whatever the fuck it is. Like the nice, good things that we want that's non-essential to life. Cakes and shit like that.
That's
all right. Cool. Capitalism, right?
Yep.
Free open market. The things that are core pillars to our life, right? We can try to redefine what that will be, but generally I would say food, shelter, housing, education, healthcare. I would throw internet on there, like an access to the internet, like some type of form of communication and some form of transport. So you
cannot survive as a human being without the internet.
So then those core necessities, you don't even have to make 100% of the market socialized, but we socialize as in we pay taxes. That taxes goes through representatives who organize and pull this money together to provide a basic level of service for housing. Think like, or for necessity. So for housing, that would be like micro apartments, right? Like $200 a month, like micro apartments, or like whatever, a basic single payer healthcare system, and like things that meet the bare necessity. And let's just say that makes up 20 to 25% of the market. So 20 to 25% of the market is maybe up to 30% is this public option that meets the necessity and gets you a stable platform of where you should be, and that the public has a say and can vote into changes of how to run this. It is not ran on profit, it is run off of necessity, because you want to plan, like you don't want to leave the important things in life up to choice. This is where a planned economy could be good, is in these specific routes, right? And then the private market can add luxury, can compete, but at least they have to compete with a set standard from the public option. So the people that win out are the customers. And then you have communism in the sense of co-ops and communes that be created on a local level.
Here's a question I have for your concept. What about absentee landlordism? Can you own land that you're not actually using?
My general belief on owning land that you don't use is that if you own a piece of land, do not use it, do not do anything, or for 10 years, you will get a note from the government that says do something with it or you're going to lose it. Like use it or lose it.
Does going there once a year for a vacation count as using it?
No. Unless if it's like a property, like as in like a vacation home. But if it's like if you buy agricultural land and you don't use it for 10 years, right? You'll lose it, right? I think that's fair.
What if you're immediately leasing it out? Is that using it?
That's using it. That's using it.
So then you can have absentee landlordism, because there's no way they would never not be leasing it out for someone to use. It's never going to sit there and not be used. Someone's going to be using it for something.
Yeah, but you can mix in, like, I think you could have economic zones, right? Like you can have economic zones for like more free laissez-faire capitalism. You can have more private owned like areas. Like you have public owned.
You could group together as a co-op and own property that you're using as that co-op, because you have 100 people in this co-op or corporation, so you're using this building. But someone else who wouldn't, you wouldn't have to go purchase the right to use a building from someone else just because they owned it and you were using it. You know what I mean? Like the only land they would own would be land they were actually using.
Okay, before we get into the nitty-gritty like
land value tax?
Oh, this is called Georgism, isn't it?
Yeah, land value tax. Yeah,
I am interested. I'm interested.
Yeah, I think basically all land rent should be taxed, because no one who owns land is responsible for its value or created it. So I think everyone has a moral claim to economic rents on land, and they should basically be be taxed and redistributed.
Where's that?
So earlier,
okay, but what do you think about everything else I said, though?
Yeah, so you're kind of talking about needs guarantees. So
I think it's great. I just asked that question.
Mostly agree, right? So I think there should be some type of needs guarantee from the government. But I think how we guarantee those needs is going to depend on what specific type of good the good is. I don't know if you've ever taken like an economics class, but there's this like quadrant you can draw of like types of goods. Based on whether they're rival in consumption and based on whether they're excludable. Excludable just means like whether or not you can charge someone for it. Rival in consumption means if your consumption like devalues someone else's consumption. So like the sun would be like a public good. It's non-rival in consumption. You can consume the sun, and it doesn't mean someone else can consume the sun less. And it's non-excludable. You can't really block out the sun. Like you can't charge people for sunlight. And then we have club goods, which are high excludability and low rivalry in consumption. So like a streaming service would be this. Like you can exclude people from a streaming service, but I mean, you watching a stream on a streaming service does not diminish someone else's stream necessarily. And then we have common resources, which have high
people doing it. It does.
Oh shit!
I mean, sure. So this is on the margin, but that gets a little more complicated. Okay, and then we have things that are rivalry in consumption but low excludability. Think of like a fishing pond. These are things that are common resources. So You can't. It's hard to exclude people from fishing in a pond without government regulation, at least. But your consumption of fish does diminish someone else's consumption of fish. And then we have private goods. Private goods are high excludability and high rival consumption. To think of like most everyday goods, like an apple. An apple is excludable. You can charge people for an apple, and it's rival in consumption. You eating an apple means someone else can't eat an apple. So I think certain things. I think there should be a needs guarantee for basically all needs, but how we guarantee those needs depends on what type of good the good is. So, for example, common resources, we need government regulation to ensure that common resources aren't depleted. We need like fishing licenses and stuff. For private goods, however, I think something like a UBI would work better because the market is really good at providing private goods. That's what the market is good at. But people need some basic income to be able to afford things like food. So I don't think the government should necessarily be producing food, but I do think we should have some type of universal basic income or something like a negative income tax to provide people with goods. And then there are things like natural monopolies, which could be even nationalized, because natural monopolies are things like railways and power, which they can be nationalized. Natural monopolies and club goods are the same.
Understand. I get the classification. I understand like exactly all the things, how you broke it down and all that. God. But in reality, it's all bullshit because there's plenty of all that. It's all the sun. There's not just one apple. There's a billion apples, and apples continue to grow, and they will continue to grow whether we exist or not. We're just saying that there's only one apple because I want that particular apple. I'll just go eat another apple. You can have that apple.
Yeah, but apples are like, they're still excludable and rival in consumption. You eating an apple means someone else can't eat an apple. Like, yeah.
But they don't have to have that apple because there's lots of apples.
Yeah, there's multiple apples, but you eating an apple still means someone else can't eat that apple. Whereas, like, you standing in sunlight doesn't mean someone else can't stand in sunlight. Like,
but they can't have that sunlight. The sunlight I'm standing in, they can't have.
Okay, but apples
my solar panel they can't have. It's all just it's still a resource. It's still there's only so much sunlight. There may be a lot of it. You know what I mean? But
they are economically illiterate.
It's all this one way or another. It's all the same.
But obviously, an apple is higher.
There is only one.
Obviously, an apple.
What if you're blocking someone's sunlight? Then they can't have some sunlight.
Oh my god, bro!
But I can go stand for.
What if you live in the Pacific Northwest and sunlight?
Bro,
is just
you guys
not
have to learn how to think on the. You got to think on the margin, okay? Obviously, on the margin.
No, I totally understand what you're saying.
It's lower rival in consumption than an apple is.
But just because we can break, that's the whole Western belief. We break things into smaller things to understand.
I don't think marginalism is a Western belief. I think marginalism is basically a universal belief. It's like
it's our way to view the world.
I feel like we keep on getting off. We're deviating here to like nitty-gritty about. Yeah, let's get off, maybe. All right, but. We're getting on some nitty gritty.
Like 7 times already. You guys are great.
We haven't even gotten to like what I would consider the core like tenets. We haven't even agreed on like what percentage and what like points should be socialized and not. Like that's why I was trying to bring up. Yeah. Okay, what should be socialized? And we just kind of went off, and now we're fucking talking about apples. There's no need to socialize apples.
Well, I like apples.
I like apples.
I mean,
I get where he was going.
Do you like apples?
I mean,
I agree.
I
told you we have to have healthcare. Healthcare is a right for everyone, but there's a bunch of products that have to get done for everyone to have healthcare. So I mean, it's different ways to do it.
No.
Healthcare
should only be a right for certain people, not everyone. Fuck off with that shit.
True.
As long as I'm one of those people, I guess. Right?
Well, it depends on what you are.
Stop. You can't.
We're on Twitch right now, man. Save it for. Listen, if we were on Kick, I'd love to have this conversation.
What do you mean? I didn't say anything.
The human people that's a lot.
I am Hispanic. Are you kidding me? You don't care about immigrants?
Healthcare only for the gays. There we go. That's one thing which will accept. Fuck them straighties. Right?
Only for woke people.
Well, Stack's in there. Stack, fucking, you got all your insulin shots, baby.
What?
Yeah.
Eagle.
Healthcare is complicated,
Oh my
but I would say
God.
healthcare
I
is
know
a
what he's
credence
talking
good.
about. You
which
know
is
what
it.
he's talking about, Stag.
what?
A certain heritage of yours that would make your right to return more likely than not.
Okay, got it. Would they accept that percentage? I don't know.
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah, they wouldn't. Like it's like the tribes that only accept like 25%, 50%. You know.
And it's also
like that.
And we're
adverse
talking about
selection
the
and
Mongol
insurance.
hordes and our relation to Genghis Khan.
Dude,
We all
right?
can,
Trust
we
me.
can all go back and be
Mulan
part
is
of the
my
Mongol
favorite
hordes. Is that
Disney
what we're
movie.
talking about? Yes.
Dude, Mulan's
I feel,
fucking
yeah, and now we're getting way off. But the thing I want to say that like we can have an open market for the things that don't matter. Like I mean, the things that like nobody needs a fidget spinner. Or we can compete and we can work for a fidget. Everybody needs shelter,
I mean,
and
nobody
it
needs a
doesn't even
fidget
have to
spinner.
be. Doesn't have to be guaranteed shelter. But if you fucking have a job and if you work, which it should be fucking, there should be some job programs out there to make sure you get into a job. Like at the very least, you know, so at least 100% of the economy can be working. You know, or like 100% as in 100% of able bodies, because obviously if you're fucking disabled and or retired, you're not going to be working,
It'll be
right?
nice.
But-
They'll be working. Your game
He
boy.
wants forceful
But-
employment.
That'd be nice.
I'm not
But
gonna
you
lie.
don't need to offer the services even for free. You could do what Japan does, where the socialized services are 70% paid for taxpayer money, and then you pay the 30%. And since it's public and subsidized, it's fucking way cheaper. Like without
Yeah,
even
but
being
what
on
is
it.
Japan based off of? That only works in one
Where's
homogenous.
Japan based off of?
Oh
The
my
Chinese people
God.
that came over.
No, it's based.
Oh my
The
god,
Chinese
bro.
people that came over.
You know,
But it's all
educating everyone
homogenous
is
now.
very expensive.
Do you think
Right?
universal healthcare
Educating
relies on
everyone's
a
very expensive,
homogeneous
like you were saying
population?
earlier.
Yes, Japan is very homogenous.
I know Japan
Every
is very
country
homogeneous,
minus
but
the
your
U.S.
claim,
is pretty much homogeneous.
To an extent.
Providing healthcare is very expensive. Feeding everyone's very
Yes.
expensive. You know what's more expensive? Not doing it. Like supporting the uneducated, supporting the sick people. That's much more
When
expensive.
people are fucking
way it is.
uneducated and people are sick, like the if you just want to be a douchebag
Wait,
about
why
like,
would you pay for that?
if you don't want to be a
Sorry.
douche, if you
You
want to
can
be
learn
like
literally
just a
anything
complete
online and
douche
nobody does.
about
If
like
you
how
want
the
to
economy works, you could just
are
even make
debunked,
that
learn
everybody
everything
should get
true.
education,
The credence
so
stuff is
that way
based on
they're
knowledge of
forced into
consumer.
fucking more educated jobs.
where the
we
market
don't have
failure
dumbasses.
comes-
That everybody
no,
should get
no.
healthcare,
From-
so that way
Why
they're
in-
should
working
in
for
credence
everyone
able
get
goods,
bodies.
healthcare
um,
food?
Why should everybody
everyone-
get?
Hold on. Where the market failure comes from in credence goods is that it's impossible for consumers to like have that type of knowledge. And consumers can't properly evaluate stuff when they don't have that knowledge. Anokaylife. Well, first of all, is there a shorter thing people call you than Anokaylife?
K. They call me K.
K.
Ah.
Okay. K.
Yeah.
Like
The
Bro,
name, yeah, like,
yes.
yeah. Have you ever
Nice
All
Do
that
you-
jumping around. Saying,
do you know what
Have I ever
crowding
read
out
that?
is?
crowding out. I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Okay. Crowding out, easiest way to think of it, if you imagine the economy at like full employment, everyone has a job,
damn it.
all resources are being used efficiently, and the government increases spending, well, necessarily, whatever project they do if they increase spending is going to have to take like employment and resources away from the private sector.
Eddie,
And-
chill. Thank you for the
oh,
follow.
I hate this whole.
And yeah, continue.
Yeah, so like
Come on, damn it.
specifically with housing,
Ah.
there's a concern that if the government builds housing, not just subsidizes private housing, but like actually builds its own housing,
Fuck.
it could essentially be taking away resources
How
from
much
from
did you, what species you
private
go to?
housing.
There.
I don't
like-
think this is the case.
I'm going half
because,
right now.
like I said,
Okay,
the
that's
public
too much.
housing would be
That's
something
half
like
too much?
think it's like
I
a
went a little bit
250
above
square
half.
foot micro apartment
I
like
should have just
Japan
gone
does.
half.
Oh,
Sure,
Right?
yeah.
Nobody
Like-
wants to live in
like
that. So
maybe
the
like
private
1.5,
sector would be
I
building
think.
like luxury
Oh, for
housing,
fuck's sake.
right? And again, this is why
Nope,
you have it be a
less.
certain percentage of the economy. So yes, you maybe like
Yes.
cheap housing,
I wanna-
or, like, as
just
in
above
like
a quarter.
like you're not going to get micro
Okay,
apartments
okay.
from the private economy, but the private
Anna,
economy
what the hell?
would most likely like go up, right? They'll okay, like let's just say this you have to pay $200 a month for these micro apartments and everything else is subsidized. The private market would then focus on, well, we can get you 500 square feet for like
Yeah,
$400.
The private market
or
would have to
$300.
compete with the government, yeah.
Well, no. Like, I'm saying the government might, in your case, like you might be right that they might get like priced out in the sense of they might not do micro apartments anymore. But since the government is only doing a certain percentage of the economy and it's only doing micro apartments, like the bare necessity, that's not a sustainable living situation forever. So you're talking about like private corporations would build houses and they would build condos, and it would be bigger, like 500 square feet, 1,500 square feet, right? And since people aren't necessarily instantly going into those houses and are able to build capital, there's still like a incentive to build those houses because they'll eventually get into them. You're not going to be so comfortable in a 250 square foot micro apartment from the government that you're going to stay in it for the rest of your life. You're going to want to, but it allows you to build equity and allows you to build like some type of stable footing.
Oh my god, that was a Kobe.
So that way you can purchase straight into like maybe a first home, right? And maybe even a vacation home. Because if people have more money because they weren't spent their whole time renting, they'll have enough money to buy a home. So now, you know, the private corporations are selling you 2 homes. Right?
I mean, it's sure, but the concern is basically the resources used to build even those micro apartments would have otherwise gone to building private developments. And basically, in the most extreme scenario, the government building housing would actually reduce the supply of housing because it was using resources more inefficiently than the private market. Now, I'm actually not too concerned about that because the effect doesn't seem to be that large. There was one study that came out of France that said that social dwellings can crowd out private dwellings by a ratio of like 1 to 2, which is bad. But that was because of sort of the weird way they did it. Like they didn't like what you're suggesting. It's like apartments denser than the current norm, whereas in France, like public developments were less dense than private dwellings, which is part of the reason they crowded out private developments.
Fuck.
That makes sense. Yeah. I would.
You said the private.
You should look at Austria. Sorry, go ahead.
I just have one real quick question. You said that the private interest is going to compete with the government. What are they competing for?
For tenants.
Are you asking me or Nonfon?
Yeah, I don't know.
Your specs.
That sucked.
You know what I mean? Like, what are they competing? So they can profit more, right? So they're competing to hoard more wealth instead of it go to the public. That's what the competition is.
Right.
I want to make more wealth off this distribution of goods to people. That's what they're competing with.
No.
They're competing for the right
I'm
to
so
make
glad
more
I got
money.
to the point where there's MMT versus
like
monetarism
stack.
arguments in my chat right now. This is so awesome, guys.
I mean, that's what the private corporations would be competing for, I guess, is to make.
We do target 2% in the US,
right?
and it's
because that's
bullshit.
what you're competing for. Is like
and the Kiwi tyranny.
You try to increase profit.
I hate the 2% target.
As opposed to the government, whose job is to just get the goods. Like the government's job is to spend money, not make money.
And
if it's
the whole
Kiwi,
I mean, if it's a good government, it would probably if it's a good government, it would want to provide a service, right? And try to make that service sustainable, right? So that way, and cheaper as time goes on, which I think does happen. Like
sustainable.
The whole thing is that the more technology we have, and the more technological advances we have, the more possible socialization of resources and general communism becomes.
But like Thomas Paine said, really simply, the government at best, the government is a necessary evil. At worst, it's a tyrant, right? So, if it's a necessary evil, then we have to have it. But how do we? So, what is its purpose? It's to spend money. It's to allocate resources, whatever. The whole question is, what do we spend this money on, and how much? You know what I mean? What are we spending it on?
That's where it becomes all subjective, Ponder. That's where it becomes all subjective and objective. Kind of my main point. Always has been. Fucking A, Ponder. I love you, bro.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just, it's
all
all bullshit because it's all just a breaking down the all into individual parts to understand it. But it's chaos. Exactly. It's a huge concept that we cannot comprehend.
This landscape just be beautiful if this game wasn't a piece of dog shit.
we can't fucking comprehend it because we're just a part of the balance that's going back and forth.
Oh, dude, we're pendulum swinging, baby. That's all we are.
My game is on like pretty high settings too.
Yeah, you guys are all great. Like I like talking to every single one of you, and I need to learn your names and all that. You know what I mean? I just like Kay was saying. I got the ADHD. I like to roam around.
Oh, Nonfon.
No, yeah, you're
nice
good,
to
man.
actually fucking talk to you, bud.
Yeah.
I was in your chat earlier. Shit. I didn't realize
who are
you were
you?
in here. Nice to meet you.
No.
Awkward.
Nice to meet you. Who?
Oh, damn. Fucking feels bad, man. Feels bad.